Let's turn our attention now to implementing our constraints. Now, before I get into this, I want to highlight something real quickly here. I want to set up my demo environment. What you're going to notice is that I'm going to have two databases. That I'm going to have one database that's going to be a brand new database, so the tables have not been created, and I'm going to add my constraints onto those. And then over on the other tab, I'm going to have, and again a little Control R to make that go away, an existing database where the tables are already there, and that way we can see how we can add constraints to an existing database. Now what I want to highlight here is that I've created my two little tables, customers and orders. You'll notice that right here I already have the identity keyword. I'll talk about why it's already there in a couple of minutes. And then beyond that, I just simply have my customer ID, my name, my email address for customers. And then on orders, I've got order ID, order date, ship date, and customer ID. So this is what I'm going to be using for my structure for all of the upcoming demos. And I want to go through both, so that way you can see how you can add this to a new table, as well as how you can alter a table to add this onto an existing table. Now the basic syntax for setting up a constraint is just as you see right there. Constraint, give it a name, specify the type, and then choose the appropriate options to go along with that. Now, the options is where you're going to see the most variation in constraint types. Now, whenever you're creating a constraint, it's always important to choose a good name. That should you error out on, for example, a foreign key constraint or a check constraint, the name of the constraint is going to be returned back in the error message. And that's about the only real way that you can send back a message of what truly went wrong. I mean, if I violate a foreign key constraint, then I sort of know right up front, oh, okay, well, there wasn't a value in the other table that matched the value that I tried to put into my table. But for a check constraint could really be anything. So you want to make sure that you choose a good name so when you see the error message, you know exactly what went wrong. As far as removing a constraint goes, this is going to be done with an alter table statement, and it's just simply going to be alter table, specify the name of the table, and then drop constraint, and then whatever the name of the constraint is. Let's start off by creating a default constraint. Now, a default constraint allows us to provide a default value. This is very helpful in scenarios where I really truly don't have a difference between a null and, say, like an empty string. Or in our example, if you place an order and you don't give me the order date, we can just default to the current date, which leads us right into that next bullet point where you'll notice that we do have the capability to call functions. Now, if we want to create a default constraint on a new column, then what we're going to do is just simply put right after the column definition, constraint, the name, default, and then whatever we want the value to be. On the flip side, if it's an existing column, then after our alter table statement, then we're going to say add constraint, again give it a name, specify default, the value, and then for the column name. So let's take a look at how we're going to do this on both of our tables. So over here, I've got my existing database. I've got the Management Studio back open. I've got my existing database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say alter table, and let's say DBO orders. And what I want to do here is I want to set the order date to now have that default constraint. So I'm going to say add constraint, give it a name. DF is typically used for default. And let's say order date. And let's say today's date, or current date, that's probably a bit better, current date, then default, and then whatever we want the value to be, so in our case it's going to be get date, and then for, and then the column that we want, so this is going to be order date. So now if I just scroll on down, I highlight that little block, and I hit execute, you're going to notice that sure enough, our command has completed successfully. Now I'm going to come back at the end and demo all of this, kind of prove that all of our constraints worked. For right now, I just want to get the table set up. Now, let's come back over here to our brand new database. And down below, we've got our order date. what I'm going to do is I'm going to say constraint df order date current date, and let's go ahead and say default, and then get date. And you'll notice here that I don't have to specify the column. The reason for that is because it's going to be the column that this is right along with. So you'll notice it was right after my order date. So we're just going to be order date automatically.